Welcome back, everybody. This is episode 13 of the Late Stage Podcast. And I'm your host, Sinan Schwarting, live from a frigid New York City. I don't think I'm necessarily late. This is becoming the usual release time, I suppose. If I am, I guess it's you can't blame Zelda anymore. I've defeated Breath of the Wild, whatever it's called. Fantastic game. Didn't want to beat it. Didn't want to beat the final boss for a long time because I was sad about the prospect of the game coming to an end. But alas, all good things must come to an end, as they say. And sure enough, beat it. I did. There was like one thing I was missing, so I got like a lame ending. There's multiple different endings you can have, so perhaps someday I'll have to revisit it and just do that one little thing and you know, have a better outcome. But anyway, since then it's I guess a lot of folks are probably in the same boat as I am as far as I'm a little late onto the whole Marvel thing. I grew up a huge comic books fan, but I always had that kind of snotty, like, film school, like, I don't know, Hollywood blockbuster films aren't for me, and, I even worked for, like, in a film, like a movie rental store back when that was a thing, and so those are notoriously the snottiest of film dudes, right? Someone would bring on Iron Man, and I'd be like, why didn't you want to rent out Fellini's 8.5, But anyway, begrudgingly, I have a kid now, and she's into things, and so I watched the entire MCU, and I kind of increasingly got into it and started, remembering all the old comic book stuff that I grew up with. Anyone who's seen me on Twitter, you'll note maybe I've put pictures up of certain comic books that I've gotten in the mail. We've subscribed to a number, so. Yeah, I've kind of had fun with the whole thing on a kind of nostalgia trip. But so, yeah, there's all of this is to say that, recently Netflix decided they were going to dump a number of their Marvel shows, perhaps because they're going to get picked up by like Disney Plus or whatever it might be. But just in case, I've been catching up. So like Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and all that. So for anyone else on the Marvel train, this is our last chance to see some of these things. So yeah, Daredevil's good. I enjoyed that. Also they've all been good so far. As far as like, again, not, perhaps not like film, but fun, kind of brainless things to watch in the background type stuff. Yeah, I've enjoyed them. Turns out I'm a little less crotchety than I used to be. I don't know. No offense to anyone out there who's still fighting the good fight against Marveldom or whatever it is. Anyway, I do have one correction from last week, and shouts to Francisco Jimenez, fellow Besiktas fan, friend of mine. He corrected me on this. This is important. So in the last episode of our podcast here, I said that Andrés Manuel López Obrador, the president of Mexico, was popular enough that we might have to talk about him being reelected in some upcoming episode. I mean, A, their next election cycle is not for another 3 years, so slightly irrelevant, honestly. But B, he can't be reelected. You only get one term in Mexico, 1 6-year term. So his party is probably in line to benefit from his popularity, but not he himself. Which, in this day and age of folks staying past their welcome in democracies all around the world, maybe there's something very commendable about that system in Mexico. Though, I mean, who knows? It could be amended through Supreme Court stuff or whatever it might be. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. But yeah, certainly a correction there. I had just read an article about how popular the president was. His ratings were high, and so I just kind of put two and two together and thought, oh, well, that probably spells good news for a re-election bid or whatever it is. But in fact, There's no such thing. It's impossible. Anyway, so yeah, that's just a minor correction, but we definitely need now to move to the news. Huge week in the news, I think we can say. My headliner, now I'm sort of breaking my rules. It's a well-covered news story, but my angle perhaps is different. You know, at least I strive for that for the most part. So first of all, we're talking Ukraine and Russia, right? And it's like just today, today being Tuesday, the 15th of February, we all saw Putin make the claim that he was sort of de-escalating, like pulling troops away from the border, which would signal good news for hopefully everyone, you know, anyone who's not too malevolent in this whole ordeal or warmongering. But yeah, so that is a claim, right? We don't know. There are claims that might not be entirely true. Even like regardless, he's got like 140,000 troops or something like that. I mean, I don't know. It's been increasing day by day, so that might be a dated number by now. But you know, more troops than one has ever seen before at that border. So you know, that claim is made amidst other facts on the ground that would still, I think, frighten most, especially if you were in Ukraine, fearing an imminent, you know, invasion. But yeah, good news for a change. And there's been talk, lots of diplomatic talks between the U.S. and Russia that have supposedly, you know, there was some good news coming out of that potentially recently, at least as far as folks showing a willingness to talk rather than resort to aggression, right? But so, you know, my angle here is like what role the media has played in all of this, because it's been fascinating to me how kind of supposedly close to war we've been and how many declarations have been made by various folks in the media and kind of experts, you know, in certain institutions, whatever it might be, and how, you know, I mean, we haven't, right? War has not started. So, I mean, first of all, on February 11th, you know, leading into this last weekend, a lot of stuff started coming up. And so specifically, right, Nick Schifrin of NewsHour, a PBS show. PBS is the public broadcast, like it's the U.S. public news channel of sorts. Not just news, they do lots of little things. They used to have Sesame Street, for example, but he tweeted that, and I'm going to have to read this. Apologies, I'm not making eye contact. But so the U.S. believes that Russian President Vladimir Putin has decided to invade Ukraine and has communicated that decision to the Russian military. 3 Western and defense officials tell me. Wow, right? Like, huge news. And he expanded on that. He said the U.S. expects the invasion to begin next week. Again, citing, in this case, Antony Blinken, right? And then he goes further. U.S. officials anticipate a horrific, bloody campaign that begins with 2 days of aerial bombardment and electronic warfare, followed by an invasion with the possible goal of regime change, right? So that was at 2:06 on February 11th. Whoops, at 2:18, 12 minutes later, he would tweet again, asked about my earlier reporting, Jake Sullivan says the U.S. has not concluded that Putin gave order to invade. Oops. Okay, so that was entirely incorrect, but that hadn't stopped in those 12 minutes. And then for the rest of the day, folks from retweeting the initial tweet, because he didn't delete it, basically preparing for war, right? And so all around Twitter, people were subtweeting, right, that like Russia's invading, and sort of going off with their hot takes, preparing for war, essentially, right? And so, whoops, he himself took that off the record just a few minutes later, but that's not the tweet folks were retweeting all day. Additionally, and I thought this was also a fairly fascinating tweet, so also on February 11th, around the same time, Melinda Herring, who is the deputy director of the Eurasia Center at the Atlantic Council. She tweeted, Putin has big weekend plans in Ukraine. 1, he's going to cut power and heat, knock out Ukrainian Navy and Air Force, kill general staff, and hit them with cyber attack. 2, then install pro-Russian president. And 3, resort to full-scale military invasion if Ukraine doesn't give in. Bam, right? Like, huge claims, scary claims, and fairly detailed ones, right? Like the whole plan is laid out for anyone who might even doubt the veracity of it. So you think this has to be like it's a serious expert on one hand, it's a legitimate journalistic enterprise on the other, a serious journalist, and they're reporting detailed facts about an invasion. Must be true, right? Well, no, right? Just a few days later, it looks like this thing might be heading towards de-escalation. And of course, even that, right? It's just reports from Putin who, like, in a list of folks you're going to trust. I don't know how high Putin's going to be on that list. At least not my list. I can't speak for you folks, perhaps. So, weird, right? Crazy stuff. One has to question the role the media is playing. And I honestly pity them. I'm not saying that they're necessarily to blame. They're clearly getting well-sourced, detailed information. And so the question is like, why? Why are they getting such wrong information, so hot and heavy, right? So much of it, and it's information that they're confident enough in that they're putting it back out there. Yeah. The conspiracy theorists in me would, I mean, this seems to benefit Putin the most, right? Like it makes kind of a mockery of the West, as he likes to frame it, of democratic nations like the United States who keep basically, like they've pulled their whole embassy staff out of the country or moved them west temporarily to the west of the country and then to pull them permanently out, theoretically, while they work out visas. I mean, like a full retreat, right? So again, right, making a mockery of the United States in that sense. All for what, right? It turns out he was bluffing. He didn't even really want to go to war. What a crazy lot these Americans are reacting like that. So emotional, and then also the media. But then not even the media, right? The Atlantic Council, like legitimate institutions who hire experts to specifically know about this region, they're getting it all wrong. So, I mean, it undermines just the right people for someone like Putin. So, again, in this day and age, right, where a narrative can be created so fluently, so casually, if you can just get to the right folks with certain information somehow, and they'll get it to the folks who are bringing it to you live on Twitter or on the news itself, or in press conferences held by the United States Secretary of Defense or whatever it might be. Now you're kind of making people look stupid with relative ease, right? And I think that's the age that we live in with misinformation. And it just shows you that it's not just like dummies on the internet, who are getting weird info about the vaccine. I mean, everyone is prone to being deceived in this day and age, including the purveyors of, information, right? The journalists are self-described at the very least. That's harsh. Perhaps that was harsh. Anyway, but so yeah, that was the first story out of Russia. The second one that I thought was sort of fascinating was British Foreign Secretary Liz Truss, made a show of going to the foreign minister of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, with this kind of firm diplomatic stance, like, we're going to come and we're going to talk, but we're not going to capitulate at all. We're going to be, tough on these Russian folks. And Sergei Lavrov, in a kind of rhetorical question, right? Because I think he's suggesting our troops aren't invading, right? Like, they're not in the Ukraine. What is this all about, right? Kind of playing, which, to be fair, right, it's not a very genuine stance, perhaps. It's definitely disingenuous. But, so he says, but he asks if Voronezh and Rostov are, if they're allowed to have troops there, right? If those regions belong to Russia, and they are regions in Russia where the troops are, and I think he's stating like that's where the troops are. They're not in Ukraine. You can't tell us we're not allowed to have Russian troops in Russia, right? And again, it's not. It's pretty disingenuous. But she replies to that rhetorical question: the UK will never recognize Russian sovereignty over these regions in Russia. Which again, like, if you're the foreign secretary of the UK, you're tasked with preventing a war between Russia and Ukraine, and Russian troops are stationed in Voronezh and Rostov. Like, I might not know offhand that they're parts of Russia. I mean, I actually do, and it's because I played a silly video game that made me know this. But I mean, it's again, right? Ironic, right? People in the United States are notoriously bad at geography, enough that you can find videos on YouTube of how silly or stupid Americans are regarding that or whatever. And here we have the Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom, unaware of the geography of the region she's tasked with bringing peace to or maintaining peace in or whatever it is, and unaware of the fact that Sergei Lavrov was asking her a rhetorical question about Russian territory. No, we will never recognize Russian sovereignty over Russian territory. Whoops. So yeah, a couple of gaffes there by non-Russian actors, which I'm sure read, your alarm bells are ringing. Oh no, this guy's pro-Russia. No, I absolutely think Lavrov was being disingenuous with the question. It's unprecedented the amount of troops that they've amassed at the border of Ukraine, and I'm anti-war. I really hope this was all some sort of bluff. Now, supposedly Ukraine has backed off of asking to be a part of NATO, if that will get Russia not to invade. A bit of capitulation, no doubt. But if that's really what this is all about, Russia not wanting the Ukraine or not wanting their backyard to be infiltrated by NATO, it's crummy, right? If that's what people in Ukraine want, and if that's what the government's organizing, it's kind of their business. But it's not like the United States hasn't done a lot of terrible things in the name of, maintaining their backyard in Central and South America, right, in the Caribbean. So many terrible coups, so many human rights violations in the name of maintaining that backyard. So it's dirty business, no doubt. But, again, that's not a defense of Russia. Hypocrisy is bad, but so is imperialism. So is trying to build back some old empire and going to war in the name of that. So bad guys abound, right? Nobody good in that scenario. Moving on to South America, in this case, Latin America. We're going to do a little Central America as well, with some stuff from Honduras in a moment. I think that's all I've got for Ukraine. Yeah. So first of all, now this is interesting. I'm doubting whether I can consider this verified. It is sourced. Now, it's sourced to a journalist by the name of Horacio Verbitsky, an Argentinian journalist who was looking into kind of the previous president of Argentina and some sort of military ideas that they were entertaining at the time. Now, what came out of it was fairly fascinating. Apparently, they had prepared an invasion of Venezuela in 2019. Again, it was former Argentinian President Mauricio Macri, and he had General Juan Martín Pelayo, who, it's of note, is currently the Chief of Staff of Armed Forces in Argentina. But so General Pelayo helped organize what was being dubbed Operation Puma, Operación, I guess. And it would have involved the deployment of a multinational force backed by a UN resolution supported by the United States. And now it's important to note that back in 2019, There were protests in Venezuela, huge problems economically. I mean, in large part thanks to sanctions from abroad, especially from the United States, of course. But because of sanctions and just terrible economic situation there, there was food shortages, just all kinds of issues, and then talk of humanitarian crises and government crackdowns of protests and stuff. So clearly they were going to use that as a front for replacing Maduro, the leader of Venezuela, with Juan Guaido, right? A fellow who's fallen out of favor since. I suppose it's worth noting that in 2020, Operation Gideon was foiled by Venezuela, where they were bringing in a sort of coup attempt, again, to get Juan Guaido in power there and Maduro out. I guess as things have somewhat calmed in Venezuela, their ability to perpetuate or to perpetrate this type of soft coup, if it's even soft, has gone out the window. But so yeah, some fairly interesting stuff that will last beyond 2019 and for some time, I think, between Argentina and Venezuela. Yeah, bad blood, no doubt. That's not going to foster good relations for sure. And I think there's a kind of cautionary tale out there for anyone who wants to do business with the likes of a Trump. In Saudi Arabia, recently they've decided they're not going to up production of oil, so they're going to still keep the price of gas high. And again, right, this attempt to hurt Biden and to help Republicans come back into power because they let them murder journalists and stuff. So they haven't somehow experienced the backside of this because the U.S. is still helping them with Yemen and all that for some reason. But and maybe that'll change now that now that Saudi Arabia is taking a hard line on oil. That would be a benefit, I guess, a good thing to come out of that. But generally speaking, right, this story of Argentina is the cautionary tale of doing business with the likes of Trump, because Trump was big friends with Macri and big on regime change and trying to get Guaido into power. And his ineptitude probably has gotten in the way of all of that and all of the problems he'd made for himself domestically, and the fact that it would look pretty bad for him to start a war unnecessarily, and it would be looked into seriously because of all the scrutiny he was under for breaking the law in various other ways. So, yeah, a cautionary tale for sure. Presidents change, terms are over in the United States, and when sanity returns, and I'm not a big cheerleader of Biden, and I'm going to have some criticism for him here for sure, eventually in this episode, but there's a degree of normalcy that came back with that, and with that comes the fact that you can't have these cockamamie schemes to perpetrate regime change and the like with a guy like that and have it not create some blowback for you long term. And you imagine that's going to hurt relations between those countries. Now, another example, Honduras. And another friend of Trump's, former President Juan Orlando Hernandez, good friend of Trump's, lots of public outings with him. He supported his elections and all that. Well, the good times are not rolling anymore. The U.S. has requested the extradition of said former President Hernandez for drug trafficking, using weapons for drug trafficking, and conspiracy to use weapons for drug trafficking, which I suppose means he wanted to do even more weapon using. I don't know if that's to use weapons. Does that mean he hurt someone with those weapons? Murder? Is there a murder charge within that? No. Even without, those are large claims to be made for a guy who was president of Honduras. Worth noting that in the last month, 3 weeks ago, he left office, and Xiomara Castro, a leftist leader, entered. A leftist leader that the U.S. had been working against, did not want to see get elected. And so it's worth noting that the party that they did help get elected is the party of this dude who's being, arrested on drug charges. Also worth noting that his brother was sentenced to life in prison on drugs and weapons charges in March of 2021. So he's from a shady line, if you will. And yeah, again, just because you're buddies with Trump doesn't mean you're going to get away with that stuff long term. And I can't imagine he is a fan of this U.S. government. But again, I don't know that matters. He probably won't come back into power. I guess who knows? But yeah, certainly bad news for him and another former Trump buddy. Moving on now to Asia, briefly. And here's where the criticism of Biden kicks in. And this is, this is bad stuff. So the Afghan central bank had $7 billion kept in New York City storage, right? In banks here. This was money that the Afghan government that was in power, pre-Taliban, had in its coffers, so to speak, right? It's tax money collected, essentially. It's their assets. Biden's administration has decided to claim all $7 billion worth of assets. A country now, Afghanistan, I don't need to, I've mentioned this on so many episodes, but if you're new to this podcast, that's a country facing mass starvation right now. They are on the brink of, last week I directed people to the IRC, the International Rescue Committee, regarding helping the people of the Horn of Africa with an incoming drought and crisis. And if you go to that link, you'll see that they're still mostly headlining the crisis that's going on in Afghanistan right now, because that is truly a devastating crisis that's happening now that they're in the throes of. And so to deny those people $7 billion right now is, heartless, is just scratching the surface. And if if you're going to make the claim that, you can't just give that to Afghanistan, it's going to go to the Taliban and you're helping a terrible regime. Okay, well, bear with me here. They're dividing that $7 billion into two. $3.5 billion are going to go to 9/11 victims and $3.5 to a trust fund to support the needs of the Afghan people, which beyond the sort of patriarchal, like we know what to do with your money better than you do aspect of that. And really putting it in a trust fund means you're just saving it for a rainy day. The rainy day is here, folks. They're starving to death en masse. But beyond that, $3.5 billion of dollars from Afghan assets. Again, the money of Afghani people, not the Taliban's money, going to 9/11 victims. We haven't done enough damage to the people of Afghanistan for something that they did not commit. The Taliban supposedly is linked to this, but even still, like of the people involved, the vast majority of them are from Saudi Arabia, not Afghanistan. Saudi Arabia, a country that we're shelling out money to, and drones and weapons to help them genocide a people. On the other side, there's the people of Afghanistan who didn't do anything. And the current, the regime that's just recently taken power wasn't even their money. It was the previous government's money and taxpayers' money. Right? We're giving half of that to people here who suffered from 9/11, who had to deal with lawyers' fees and stuff, money that this government didn't want to give them to recover from a national crisis. So the people who are starving to death now have to pay for Americans who suffered because of something Saudi Arabians did to them. Make that make sense? That's a huge strike against the Biden administration for me. And it's like, it's not a check in the box for Trump, right? Like, there's nothing different that he would have ever done. In fact, every Republican has spoken out in favor of keeping that money, including Rand Paul, Mr. Anti-War, whatever, is like, they owe us that for everything we've done for them. What have we done for them? The Taliban is in power still. They're starving to death, and we've cut them off from the outside world financially and taken the money that was already theirs. Like, what have we done for them that they owe us for? It's just such a despicable Anyway, so that is what's going on in Afghanistan, unfortunately. And yeah, certainly that's not good news. My heart goes out to the people of Afghanistan. Same link as last time. Donate to the International Rescue Committee. I mean, there are a lot of folks out there helping people of Afghanistan or trying to help. Can't be easy, you'd imagine, but I'll link it again. I'll link the IRC. It feels like a drop in the bucket, though, knowing that we're just taking $7 billion of theirs. And what I'm going to donate like a paycheck? Like what? And that's defeatist. That's not a good attitude to have. But like, I just can't. I can't fathom the injustice in that. Anyway, moving on. Finally, that's it for the episode. But I do have the weird of the week, and even this is murky, right? I couldn't decide between two just fantastic choices. I'll give you both of them. Now, it was Paul Joseph Watson, who, if you don't know who he is, good for you. Don't look him up. One of the worst human beings out there, who made the claim that conservatism is the new punk rock, trying to claim that somehow, like, it's counterculture to be a sociopath, you know, far-right fringe maniac who watches InfoWars, which is where he appeared. Well, in the vein of conservatism being the new punk rock, Charlie Kirk followed it up with a doozy this Super Bowl weekend regarding the halftime performance, which was relatively tame as halftime performances go. I mean, even relatively tame relative to typical NFL fare with cheerleaders and the like, you know. Not the most sexualized of all halftime shows by any stretch. Nonetheless, Charlie Kirk, famous new Republican or whatever you want to call him, punk rocker, made the claim that NFL is now the league of sexual anarchy. This halftime show should not be allowed on television. Oh. So I don't have to go into length on how ridiculous that is. I'm sure if you watch me, you're already laughing at that, I'm assuming. My second fun weirdo of the week, weirdos. So I've spoken at length also about the Freedom Convoy in Canada. It's been spreading to different countries, and so in Australia, it hit pretty hard. And there's a convoy in Canberra, Australia, and a PSA was released from folks organizing this event that's spread from their grasp, gotten to the public, in which they've talked about how there's like human feces everywhere, foot fungus that's spreading in the showers, so you know people have to wear their shoes in the showers or something. There's pink eye going around because people aren't washing themselves properly. So that sounds like fun. Freedom, though, you know, the Freedom Convoy, they're free to get pink eye and foot fungus. But it also sounds absolutely disgusting. So go home, folks. Like, get the vaccine. You already have to get like 8 other vaccines in order to exist in human society, right? To get my daughter into school, she had to get various vaccines before like kindergarten. So like everybody needs so many different vaccines to do so many other things. Measles, mumps, rubella, right? Like, it's just another one, folks. I don't think it's worth pink eye and living in human feces. But you do you. On that note, I'm out. Peace out, everyone. I hope, of course, yet again, that next week is brings better news, as always. But it is what it is, folks. 2022. Living. Peace out.